third generation. Masottina was founded in 1947 by my grandfather. We have about 280 hectares that we farm directly and own the land, and others are rent land. And here we brought the most prestigious children of our terroir collection. The terroir collection that accounts for, that shows the identity of our vineyards and area. And in particular, we have two denominations, Codegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore and Prosecco DOC, Prosecco DOC with six wines. And in particular, then, for the DOCG, we also have two Rive of Prosecco Superiore from our main headquarters that is in Uliano. That is the hills east of our city, Conegliano, which is famous across the world as a city of wine and arts. And I'm happy that the tasting will be chaired by Cristina Mercuri and Filippo Bartolotta, two dear friends of mine, because they can always interpret in the best possible way wines that have global success, given also the numbers and the volumes of sales which these two denominations have achieved. But inside this area, there are still wines that need to be discovered, not just globally, but in Italy. And I am particularly keen on the purest identity of Prosecco in general, which means the Rive wines. And like a famous journalist, a soccer journalist who were wondering who is the best soccer player and was talking about Maradona, Pelé, and suddenly he said that Pelé was a good, Maradona better, and George best. So Prosecco God is good, Rive is best. So Rive is the one I like the most. And then we will ask our guests. Later they will tell us at the end of the tasting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Federico. So there are plenty of friends. So let me remove my bag from here. We have 6 wines with the rest of the world, and then in Milano there will be a small surprise too. With Cristina Mercuri, we decided to have a different tasting, in the sense that there will be a sort of match between a group of wines and another group of wines. So 2 teams. Of course, my team is better than Cristina's. Well, we'll see, Cristina is saying. In any case, the idea is to have, let's say, a first round of tasting with hidden wines, anonymous wines. We don't know whether they are Prosecco DOC, Conegliano Valdobbiadene DOCG, Rive, Brut, Extra Brut, or Extra Dry, which is perhaps a more traditional style and sugary. So, but it's interesting to me to do that because considering the wines I tasted at the winery, then we met at Alchimia restaurant to taste, to pair your wines. And then the other day I uncorked all the bottles. And then the day after, at room temperature, I have to say that the wines always show a side. Especially when we taste the Prosecco, you have 6 degrees from the refrigerator, and they leave memories and different impressions. And I think wines should be tasted also professionally at the temperature at which consumers will drink the wines. However, we are experts, and so we have sometimes the task of checking what happens behind the scenes. So, The wines are here, and so they have the right temperature tonight. And I have to say that I found quite a few surprises compared to my expectations in terms of gram per liter and versus the perception of sugar, roundness. And so it will be curious to see and hear how you respond to these wines. But before starting, I don't know, perhaps we can start with our PowerPoint presentation. First of all, I will give you a sort of background, some context to talk about the Prosecco pyramid, because maybe some of you know very well the Prosecco pyramid. However, the Italian appellations are quite complex, so I will try to summarize a very ancient history. I mean, I don't want to come into place Plinius the Old saying that he tried to understand the habits and customs of Livia, the wife of the emperor, who seemed to live much longer than the other women because she was drinking Puccinum wine, and then Galenus, the doctor, suggested in 100 after Christ to drink that as a panacea. But aside from this short introduction, Prosecco, in the area of Prosecco, wine is discussed already in some documents, in ancient documents, and laws were issued. For instance, in the 1200, there were sanctions and fines for those who were tempted to steal grapes in this moment of the year. In fall, and also during harvest it was forbidden to walk in the vineyards with dogs, apparently. In any case, this means that wine has always been made in this territory. In 1600 we have the first maps related to the types of soils and so on, and then in the midst of the 18th century Prosecco as a variety started to appear for the first time. However, we have to wait for the 1800s, and I tell this especially for non-Italians, when Italy became a state. It was 1861 when Italy became a state, and in 1864 we say that the first Prosecco bottle was made with a sort of Charmat method, so with re-fermentation in a sort of a pressure tank, an autoclave. Even better, Martinotti, Federico, who didn't patent the Martinotti project, but only in 1895, did that in 1895. And so this was 30 years before that, the development, but then Charmat stole the patent from Martinotti. However, 30 years earlier, the Prosecco was made. In Conegliano, we have the first wine school in 1876, and I'm not just keen on giving you all these figures, but I say this because where there are wine schools, there are communities that aren't just single producers, but terroir develops. So between the 1920s and 30s, the consortia were created, and then in 1960 the first denomination. But 2009 is the year when there was a real turning point, a real revolution that is represented by this pyramid, because in 2009 there is a sort of reformulation of the DOC. So Prosecco DOC can be now made in 9 provinces, in 2 regions. Most of this Prosecco DOC is still made in a region called the Veneto, about 82% compared with Friuli, Venezia Giulia, the other region. And we have about 24,500 hectares of Prosecco grapes at the base of that pyramid. And that can be made with a yield per hectare of 180 quintals, so 18 tons per hectare. And so the yield is pretty high, pretty generous, Federico. And then we will see that with Cristina. And then if we move on, in Prosecco we have the Treviso DOC, which is in the largest layer. And then we go up with Asolo. Asolo DOCG makes about 27 million bottles. Area under vine is 20,000 hectares. And then we have the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Superiore DOCG. In the two green layers, you have Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG, means 8,000 hectares under vine. Yield goes down to 135 quintals, and so yield is lower. And there are 8,000 hectares under vine for a yearly quantity of bottles that is around 100 million bottles, more or less. Then we climb another step and we get to the denomination of Conegliano Valdobbiadene, which is called Rive, which is different because the hectare per yield per hectare goes down to 130, and the Rive are 43. The Rive means slope, and here we have 207 hectares for about 2 million bottles. And in the end, up on top, we have 107 hectares of Cartizze. And here we have 1.2 million Cartizze bottles, and the yield per hectare is 120 quintals, 12 tons per hectare. This is more or less the structure of the pyramid. And now, or since 2009, Glera and Prosecco are considered to be synonyms. And so now we can see that also. And here, this is something that Cristina is supposed to talk about before we start the tasting. So all these figures and all these considerations about the pyramid, how does that translate into the glass? So how can we understand whether we are talking about DOC, DOCG, or Rive? So all these natural factors are such that there are, of course, consequences in the glass. So what are the natural factors we should focus on when we compare DOC and DOCGs? Well, first of all, altitudes are different and slopes are different. The DOC area is very diverse and is more flat, with hills, very mild, low hills. Whereas in Conegliano Valdobbiadene DOCG, we have the UNESCO area, so there are very steep terraces, and slopes are much higher, even 70% inclination, and also the altitude is higher. So steeper slopes, higher altitudes, which means to have a different interaction with the light, the sunlight, and temperatures. And so in daytime, yes, maybe I have, so it's warm, but in nighttime it's colder. So there is more temperature difference between night and day. And then I have a different aeration, different air circulation. And so breezes and winds that are different. What does this mean in the mast, for the mast and the wine? This leads to acidity, which is stronger because maturation is longer, or ripening is longer, and also we have more aromatic compounds, and so more intensity and more concentration. And as a consequence, this should lead to voluminous, denser and deeper wines on the palate. And this is not just this is just one natural factor, but there are also soils. The variety of soils is very large. But if I were to tell you the difference between DOC and DOCG, I may say that in DOCG we have poorer soils, and we have to make a difference between the area of Valdobbiadene and the area of Conegliano. because in the area of Conegliano, where we have Ogliano, where our rive were made, the soils are poor with a lot of limestone. And what does this mean in the glass? The nose is a bit more subtle and less powerful, and there is more emphasis on the texture. And so the wines in the end will reward more the palate than the nose. And then be careful, because it's up to you to tell me which ones are deeper than the others. Whereas in the area of Valdobbiadene, soils have more clay, and as a result, also pH is different, and there are more nutrients in the soil. The nose is more open, aromatic, and powerful and impactful. And of course, our wines are mostly blends from various vineyards, except for Rive. And then Glera. We all know Glera. Glera is a very important variety that tends to maintain this acidity, which is vibrant and powerful. That tends to be different depending on whether we are in a DOCG or a DOC area. Glera gives delicate aromatic notes and can be perfect to make the spumante wines, the sparkling wines. And of course, I leave the floor to Filippo, because when we started with the definition of the consequences on the glass, you should all have all the data to understand this is DOC, that's a DOCG, and that's a Rive. Be careful though, because Masottina has a method that is innovative and very particular, and so also DOC or some labels of DOCG are treated in a very aspirational way. And when I say aspirational, I mean that they keep them on leaves for a longer period of time before second fermentation, and also in the pressure tank they spend more time, lower yields, and so you have to do something a bit challenging for you, because we will write down your answers and we will discuss and see whether they're right or wrong. And the other question we'll ask you is, which is your favorite? Which is the best quality of the three? Because Filippo will taste the first three and I will taste the second group of three. And what is the style that you prefer? Maybe more gastronomic style, traditional, or elegant, or playful, or refreshing. We will decide that together. What do you think, Filippo? Can we start? Yes, it's a great idea. I would like to thank the sommelier. I need number 2 and number 3 also for us. You have only the first one. You have the first one. Okay, so we can start with the first one. I wanted the 3 of them together because, so if the sommelier can hear me, can you come back with the other 2 wines, please? Because the idea is to do this exercise. We know by now that so it's a kind of mindfulness exercise, because when you taste wines, we should just think about what is happening, what is going on. Sometimes I say we should do some mind emptiness, because if the mind is full, we cannot do something else, but of course it's a joke. In any case, in particular, Federico, as far as Prosecco is concerned, there is always this sort of, we say, Prosecco is fun, Prosecco is the entertaining industry. Yes, true, I say. And that's the reason why many say that they would like to do what Federico does, that is to say, such a successful wine. So the characteristics of success sometimes are tied to the positioning, that is to say, the collective brand. And on the other side, that people fell in love with this product. And in particular, I believe, if we go back to our mindful exercise, when it comes to wines like Prosecco, it's more difficult to find the nuances. Also because these wines are made to be very open for consumers. Among Masottina wines, there are always some champions that I always find them every time I like them more. And also in the anonymous bottles I tasted at home, I find the depth, because that Cristina was talked about, when she talked about the temperature differences day and night. Today we tasted the Rive wines, and the Rive have a soil with morainic debris from an old glacier. So a lake was created that made the hill go up. So we have a kind of theater made of morainic debris. And on these hills you have these vineyards. If you go around with Federico, well, he drives a very dangerous Subaru car. So for rallies. So he uses this very dangerous Subaru, of course, I'm joking, metallic blue Subaru. You can tell the difference because the Rive in Ogliano have an eastern slope versus an western slope. The east should be colder and the wine should be more tensed. But in the world of Prosecco, there is always a fundamental factor that comes into play, residual sugar. And so we can understand, of course, here there are many professionals, and you can understand that whether there is more or less sugar, maybe yes, but there is also a matter of ripening of the fruit, age of the vineyards, and also we Prosecco has two biotypes, the Tondo and the Lunco. The first is aromatic, the other is more sugary, more full of sugar and acidity. And if you, during harvest, you taste the Glera variety, you can tell the difference between the different clones, because each and every one of these biotypes has 5 on one side and the other 14 clones. So our sommelier poured everything, we have them all together. So let's see what they are like. So without moving the glass too much for the time being, so just let's have a quick sniff. We can already perceive a remarkable difference. First of all, for many years I've always tried to find the organoleptic, the olfactory, the specific feature of Prosecco. Well, I have to say that one of the typical distinctive features of wines that age well, aged in barrique, is vanilla or wooden notes. And Glera has in its genetic makeup already this kind of flavor. Since Prosecco is aged at least in the 60s, so this is not aged very much. So the smells, the notes are notes of vanilla. Vanilla stick is common to the first 3 wines, and then we will see the next ones with Cristina. So vanilla is a common sign of complexity, natural complexity of this wine that I always look for, and that gets blends with citric elements, lemon, cedar, sometimes tangerine, kumquat, that always stand out related to the ripened fruits and tropical fruits. However, let's see that there is another factor which is quite present, quite strong, which is a trait of white pepper. Especially the first wine, I perceive this scent of white pepper and basil leaves, so mint. So, of course, these are very nuanced, very delicate and mild, and some floral notes, which is more hawthorn, maybe acacia. Whereas for the I haven't tasted them yet. However, for the second wine, together with this, I think that there is a very intense flinty note. So it's more mineral than the first one. And most of all, we have this smell of pine tree resin, so it's balsamic in the second one. The first one was much less so. And then enter the more citric part is more cedar than lemon, then wisteria, and then the last wine. Here we have vanilla, white pepper, lemon, and in particular, you have the lemon lollipop. I know that the nose cannot perceive sweetness, but it smells more sweet. Let's taste it. So the beauty about Prosecco at 6:53 here in Milan p.m. is that we don't need to spit it. Why? Well, because are you drinking too much, Filippo? Well, no, because first of all, the alcohol content is hard to perceive because it's very light. And this is a benefit, especially with these delicate wines. The alcohol content must be pretty low. Sometimes, in some cases, we don't exceed 12 degrees. For some time, for many years, that was a problem. We have always looked for more and more sugar and more alcohol. But luckily, this has changed. And we can work also on the more delicate part of the wine. On the palate, I find all what I perceived on the nose with a finish that reminds of pineapple or something sweet, rather intense. Then the second wine is more austere, and there is, I wouldn't say a tannic hint, but I would say there is, probably it's because of catechins. It's a more phenolic component of the wine, so there is some sapidity. So if we want to find a difference, I would say that they are very different, because what's happening? Actually, I find more juiciness in the first one, a more intense acidic contrast, and a slight mineral note, like the pencil that you used in so the lapis, the graphite. So the pencil, I like to say lapis, which is the pencil. When you were sucking the pencil when you were a kid at school. Then wine number 3. I go back to so the mouthfeel is a bit sweeter. So when I was talking about lemon, I meant the lemon lollipop with the the lollipop with the licorice stick. So the So in the second one, it was more balsamic with lemon skin. Whereas it seems with this one, it's when you go to Amalfi and you get a nice lemon juice or a lemon popsicle. And What matters, however, is to have your feedback because it's easy to be on my side. I know the wines, but so the idea is that, first of all, these are very different, and also for this idea of the mind emptiness, also from the tactile, textural standpoint, they are very different. And so I think that these wines are so this prosecco starts to be more contemporary, and that can be paired with food very well, like a pasta asciutta with shellfish, or also meat tartare, maybe. Certainly seafood or shellfish, and also a great pairing is canestrelli, the Venetian canestrelli, with these, which is fish, like shellfish. So now I'm hungry. Well, in a moment we will go eat at Alchimia. So I should now focus on wines and not food. So we had the first round, so the first cluster. So you have tried these wines and tasted these wines, and so you have understood what they are like. And with me, we will be talking about the shape of these wines and the potential occasion for drinking these wines. So let's start from wine number 4. Wine number 4, if you haven't, probably you haven't the other ones. So let's focus on number 4 for the time being. And I would like to ask you this. And then I will repeat the answers for our friends in New York. So, is the nose similar to the previous ones, or is it very innovative? What do you think? Is it the same or different, or totally different? What do you think? Who says it's similar to the previous nose? 1, 2, and who says totally different from the previous ones? Well, let's say that it's 50-50 here in Milan. Maybe in New York they might have a different impression, but on my nose, this one I think is pretty similar to another one, the one that has this lemon note with this citrusy note with some depth already on the nose. It's a wine which isn't very impactful, but that it's like taking a step backward to put the focus on the palate. And so let's taste it. So let's say, what about acidity? So high acidity, that's normal. Then vibrant, refreshing, fulfilling. What would you say? How would you describe this palate? We will use the same terminology for the next ones. I would say that it is vibrant and linear. Do you agree? And slim and slender. And what stands out compared to the previous wines? So there is more fullness, but do you think it's because of the style and residual sugar, or is it because maybe it's different place or a different expression? Who says it's because of the residual sugar? Raise your hands if you think it's residual sugar. Well, minority. And 3, okay. And who thinks? I guess the others think that it's because the air is different. And actually, this is the same expression of a wine you have already tasted, but with a different residual sugar. And so this is, as you can tell, there is a common denominator. You can perceive the typicity of the variety and of the place, but the approach is different. This is more traditional, more history, more depth, and that is an international benchmark when it comes to Prosecco. And in the meantime, you are being served the other wines. So let's move to number 5 and 6, and then we compare and contrast the characteristics on the palate, because I want to know of your feedback about the palate and the depth of this one. So let's move to the 5th one. The 5th one, so what do you think? How is the nose? Is it more or less intense than the previous glass? Please raise your hands. Who thinks it's more intense? Number 5 compared to 4. And what about the others? Is it less intense? Do you confirm? Yes. Well, I think it's a bit more intense and impactful than the other one. Of course, it's a nuance. So we're always talking about different wines that in any case come from Masottina. And so the level is very high quality, top quality. But this is more lively and younger, also not only in terms of age of the wine, but also in terms of expression, youthful. And I find a mixture between lemongrass, sage, mild sage note. So a wine that is slightly simpler than the previous one, yet very vibrant and expressive. Let's see if the palate confirms the nose. Well, this wine, what would you say? Would you say it's on the front of the palate, mid palate, or it's more ample on where it gets enlarged towards the cheeks? What do you think? So who says that it's more on the front of the palate? So that gets in the front of the palate and expresses itself and then goes down. And who says it's a wine that expresses itself in the mid palate, so in the middle of the palate, below the tongue? And then I think most of you say it's a more ample wine. I agree with you. This is halfway between saying it's an impactful wine in the front palate and amplitude. Because here we have a great marriage of different expressions and vineyards that have given this wine a great expressivity. So it's very much on the front of the palate. Immediately you perceive the taste of the nose, but then it gets enlarged. And so it's not vertical. I mean, it's not straight, so it gets in, then enlarges and spreads and goes away. So how do we want to define the acidity? Slender, linear, welcoming? I would say refreshing. Because in the end, I'm speaking and I feel my palate very clean and refreshed by this gentle acidity, very pleasant, maybe little less than the previous wine, but a good balance with the residual sugar for a very playful, fun wine, which is a light-hearted wine. So, dear Filippo, that you can drink without food. Perhaps your flight of wines were, well, you say it's better, but they will say so. Probably they prefer my flight of wines. So let's move to number 6. Number 6, the impact, we perceive something very different. Because the other two were wines, more impactful wines, that would stand out and show what they are like immediately. This is a wine which is more subtle, and also more discreet. And more than citrusy floral notes, I hear notes of sage, of soil, or flintstone, and emphasis not on fruit. So it's more austere, I would say. Let's taste it. And in this case, the position on the palate is very clear. Mid palate, it goes there, mid palate, and stays there, dense, solid, and then it goes away. So it's very directional in the mouth. So it expands thanks to the balance between acidity, which is vibrant because it's almost crispy and pungent, and the residual sugar that gives it some volume and shape. And now I would like to do this compare and contrast exercise. And of course, you drew your own conclusions, and you have your thoughts about the best quality among my wines, but I will ask you later. So when we discover the names of the bottles, of the labels. But what's the main impression of my wines? Are they more traditional? Are they more such that you drink them alone, without food, or for aperitifs? Or what do you think? What are the distinctive features in these glasses for my three wines? I mean, the common denominator. So let's take a vote. Who says these wines are more traditional? Raise your hand. Well, quite a few traditional. Okay, yes, that's true. And who says that these wines have more weight? So a load, more density, more depth on the palate. The other half. And so we are in trouble. We are 50-50. And later on we will have to see how to sort out this, come up with the definition of the common denominator of the fil rouge. However, quality aside, which is constant, though the styles are very different, let's say that my personal taste is such that I have my answer. I marked it here. Then we will see. In any case, what's interesting to understand Cristina, because Cristina talks about, rightfully so, about peso, weight. But do we understand which are the extra dry Prosecco versus the brut Prosecco? Do you understand that? Have you identified them? Which are the extra dry? 6? Some say 6. What about the others? Among these 6 wines, there are 3 wines which are brut, the other 3 are extra dry. Which are the extra dry? Some say 1, number 1. So you said 1, then many said 6. And who is the other extra dry? 5. Some say 5, some say 4, 5. 5, okay. 1, 6, and 5 are extra dry. Well, that's true. 1, 6, 5. And then 2, 3, and 4 are with a lower residual sugar, so more gastronomic wines. Do you agree? Well, we will see if they are right. Sam is saying also, Valentina is saying, the first 3 are one way, the other 3 are another way. That's another assumption. The interesting thing is that as we tasted them, so despite I know them, I have to say, so I have the names here that are looking at me. Well, sometimes I have to say that the difference between the Rive Prosecco and the Prosecco DOC stands out maybe due to lower yield. And also there is the wind. We are at 100 kilometers from Cortina and 50 from Venice. So it's a different position compared to the others. And so regardless of residual sugar, these wines seem to have a structure, so a dry residue that is more relevant regardless of residual sugar. Yes, so you have to focus on fruit concentration. So how dense and how ripen is this fruit? Do we need to add sugar? And if so, how much? What's the right balance? What's the balance I want to achieve? So, and these thoughts have been very interesting because the style isn't necessarily related to residual sugar. And also, quality aside, because aside from the quality level, but what is your favorite wine? Tell me. Let's take another vote. Who is in favor for your personal taste? Just to have a sort of survey. Maybe, I don't know if we can interact with New York, if someone can tell us from New York. What's your favorite one? Who says one is your favorite? So wine number one. Who has the favorite number one? Number two? Federico is worth 2 points. Federico, have you got... Wait. I was curious to see the others. So number two, how many? 8 here. And number three, who prefers number three? 1, 2, 3, 4. And number 4, who is for number 4? 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, 4. Very good. And then 5. Who votes for 5? 5. And number 6? So mines were better. I knew that. So the interesting thing we can unveil, so we can go on the other side so that we can show the bottles. But before, since I have the data here, Cristina, the interesting thing is that all these wines are around 11.8 in terms of alcohol. Never go exceed 12, so it's always 11.80. Then pH. pH is always 3.15, 3.25, so fairly low pH. As Cristina said, in relation to that creaminess, acidic creaminess come from this pH. And then the other interesting thing is pressure, the pressure of these wines. Because I noticed that 1 for 1 and so they are all around 4.5, other than the last one, which is the one you like the most, of course, which is 3.9. So this could be an interesting parameter. And as to residual sugar, this is also the highest of all. And so in any case, sugar always helps in all wines, no matter how expert you are. And so sweetness, especially at the end of the day, sweetness helps, sugar helps, because it makes wines pleasant and actually traditionally extra dry, that is between 17 and 32. Let's unveil them? Okay. You know, it's 7:15. We have to take the bus within... otherwise, Roberta Sorini is coming here to... Have you got any question before we unveil the names? Also, are there questions from New York? If you have questions. I think that someone should perhaps tell us. Yes, there is someone who is going to tell us the question. And in the meantime, we discovered what you like. You said the extra dry. But now we have to understand which is the one that has the best quality. So generally it's the deepest, most concentrated, and has a different weight on the palate. Which one do you like? The last one. Federico, the second one. Second. And you? I like the second one, but I thought for the second one, I mean, I like this drive, this sapidity of the wine. And also that element of contrast, almost tannic contrast, but especially the length of the second. I would drink it certainly with a risotto and faster, maybe. It's the one I would drink faster. Is there a question from New York? Can you tell us? Wait, there is. We have a question from London, actually. And so they ask for wine number 1 and number 3. Does the vanilla come from wood? And if not, where from? Well, I don't know. Maybe you didn't hear what we said at the beginning, because at the beginning we said that the variety Glera has these natural components of benzonoids and these vanilla flavors and wood, which are part of the DNA of the Glera variety, but there is no day in the barrel. So there is no wood. So let's unveil them. Okay, so we go on the other side. It's going to be tough. So wine number 1. So who says that this is top quality? Raise your hands. So who says this is Rive, the top quality? Not many. Who says it's a DOCG, Contrada Granda? And who says this is DOC? Most say this is a DOC. Unfortunately, oh yes, you're right, DOC. There's a question from New York, if you can relate it to us. Report it. It's a question from Toronto. Is it cold already down there? Last time I was in Toronto, it was 24th of December and was minus 23. You would go out of the hotel and you would choking cold. How can you live in such a cold place? In the meantime, while we wait for a question, I unveil number 2. Number 2 is Rive.
The number. I love number 2. So, but it was very interesting because you said number 5 was slightly sweeter than number 4, and yet no one's talked about total acidity. And I felt number 4 was actually sweeter because number 5, I think, has more total acidity. To understand the impression of sugar, you have to know what the total acidity is.
So in 4 grams per liter, do you have the acidity? No. The residual sugar, the 4th, is 15 grams, 15.2 grams. And so technically speaking, it's the sweetest of all. Whereas for the acidity, For tartaric, I don't have that figure yet. Because I don't have this figure, but regardless of these technical data, the residual sugar is very similar, 14, 15, but acidity is different because the areas are different, you know. One it looks is less sweet, but it's the origin, so the place that is different. And by the way, for the question, I would like to say that when I talked to Federico, but I double-checked with him, in any case, on average, the gram per liter of acidity for these wines is between 540, 560, 580. So this is for grams per liter. But this is also related to pH, because what our friend says, acidity is important, but acidity is also the result of pH. So then number 3, some said number 3 is Brut. Well done. This is Contrada Granda Brut, Prosecco DOCG. So you are a very smart bunch of students. Yes, of course, they are great experts. And then if you come to dinner, we will discuss that in greater length. But for wine number 2, aside from, well, you like it or you don't like it, but it's very clear that there is more contrast, more acidity, more structure, more depth, more juiciness. Then you say, maybe I like another one which is softer, less intense, and fine with me, of course. But for this one, there is the residual sugar is pretty low, and technically this could be an extra Brut, because we are around 4 as grams per liter, which is a trend, Federico, that you are following. Am I right? For some of your wines. Also considering the last few years, what do you think? Well, yes, it's a trend. It's a global trend in the world of Prosecco, especially for the Italian market, to make wines more Brut. We have done that after 10 years in our Brut RDO, the second wine. We have always done that since 2013 at 6 grams, whereas 2021 is the first one with the 14 grams. Because the vineyard is relatively young, and at the beginning, when so at the beginning it was very lively, and the sugar was too low. The 4, like in this case, might make it more angular than what it is. Because I like it because it's angular and sharp. But it would be too sharp. On the contrary, as years go by, and since the vineyard is evolving, we managed to put less sugar. So we decided, so it's more balanced, and so we decided that we could lower the sugar content from 6 to 4 to make you understand the identity of this single vineyard. It's very interesting to lower the sugar. That's not necessarily, I mean, you have a wide range, but certainly that's a nice attempt. So adding something drier to the range is great, especially from those grapes that I had a chance to taste during harvest. And also, since these 6 wines are from the Collezione Terroir, the collection Terroir, then we have the collection 96, Collezione 96, and my father, the enologist, focuses more on the vineyard. So it's called the 96 because it's an harmonious number. And so he tries to find the perfect harmony in these wines, in that collection. but that's a decision by my father, who tries to domesticate the terroir. And so there is more Adriano Dal Bianco in that collection than in this one. These are different, the contrary. So as Cristina said, 4, 5 with these waves that go up and down, that go inside the palate and go out. This is done on purpose. This is done on purpose because the terroir should speak before the enologist in this case. The enologist should pay respect and just stays behind the scenes and leaves the terroir to speak. Let's the terroir to speak. Number 4, you said it's a Brut, and actually this is a Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore, extra dry. Sugar is 15.1.2, and in this case, it has a nice contrast. Then the second wine by Cristina, for Cristina, Camaggiore Prosecco DOC Treviso Extra Dry. So you all understood. In any case, you liked it a lot. So we shouldn't stick too much to the pyramid and the regulation, and let's focus on the quality of. So you said that number 5, you like 5 better than 4, which is the OCG. So the style, the signature is very important. And the last one, if you know Masottina, you see the blue and red, and you have understood that this is Rive Dogliano Extra Dry. And also in this case, the game we played with Cristina is Brut versus Extra Dry. The Beauty and the Beast. And if you have no further questions, we say goodbye to New York and London. If they have no questions, are there questions? But in the meantime, here in Milan, we have 2 more wines. There is a question from New York. They ask whether extra dry is still the most traditional method in Italy, and what do people drink in Italy? Is it always the most traditional style or not? Yes, in this case, the trend is still strong for extra dry in terms of volumes. It's also a matter of palate, because the average consumer instinctively drinks extra dry, even though they will tell you that they want to drink Brut, but in blind tastings, extra dry is the most successful and popular. And also Federico can confirm the sales of extra dry is, in any case, much higher than Brut. Yes, despite the trend of Brut, Prosecco is growing, it doesn't reach the levels of extra dry. Extra dry is overpowering in the Prosecco world, the OCG and DOC. Very well. So let's say goodbye to Toronto and New York and London. I hope I named all the towns. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. And we in Milan, so we all say goodbye like princesses and princes. So I would like to put number 7 here for Milan. So we go to Cervelloni for the dinner. So should you join us for dinner? 7:45, you have to be out of this. And it's 7:30. And we have 2 more wines to taste. Number 7 is only for us. And these are 2 wines. last year, always here at Milano Wine Week, so let me do this. So last year we had a vertical tasting up to 2014, but with Federico and Cristina we uncorked also 2010, of which, because 2010, is much more tense than 2014, that polarized a lot. And we were saying with them on the web, so 2014 became very popular because some said that there was not enough bubbles. But of course, it was just the curiosity to taste the Rivedoliano. Of course, that was just a fun game for experts. I think you wouldn't serve a Prosecco that is from the year before or the most recent year. So now we have to identify the vintage, so the year you are tasting. Is that easy? Yes, it is. I didn't mark it. So what do we have? And especially, which wines are these? Do you all have 7 and 8? So we can compare. So these are very different wines. One with a lot of residual sugar, the other is more tense and reactive. One is fresher. The first one, still with notes of kumquat and tangerine, very fresh and tense, very mineral, almost saline, marine breeze. So 7 is very charming, intriguing, and subtle, with the vanilla note that keeps standing out even more intensely than before. Then there is red apple skin and tea and bergamot. That's very complex. And again, orange peel, not lemon and tangerine, but the essential oil. Whereas the other one is more mature, I would say. Yes, it reminds of acacia honey. So citrus, lemon, sage, apple, more yellow apple, and this note of acacia honey. So it seems that it's more opulent, and that this opulence comes from a different location of the vineyard. And it's as if these vineyards have a different exposure, different slope, because in this one there is more grace and expansion. But also mango, or more mature, more fattiness, more creaminess. First of all, do you like 7 or not? A lot, yeah. So those who say that Prosecco has no potential for aging, well, it takes time. It takes time. And education is important. Then there's no accounting for taste. You may even like to suck your socks. That's what he said. These are two different wines. These are two different wines. The residual sugar number of the second one is more relevant, but we also have the pink grapefruit flavor. The temperature, serving temperature, a round of applause to our sommelier, if you can hear us. I have to say that serving temperature is essential. And I think that in Italy we don't pay enough attention to the temperature. And temperatures are key. And also glasses need to be very, very clean. So if you go back to the previous wines, on the one side, you have more flavors, but the texture is no longer pleasant. These wines must be fresh, and because they must quench your thirst. So one is sweeter, but what's the year, the vintage? So let's do a maturity cluster. So let's say young from 1 to 3 years as a cluster of slender wines, wine that is powerful. Then 4 to 7 years are the wines of opulence and richness, and the wine that is very complete. Then from 7 to 10 years are the wines of grace and integration. I like that definition. So these two wines are same year, are still slender or rich or grace, in the grace. Who say that they are in the stage of slenderness? 5. Who says richness? 10. The other was the stage of grace from 7 to 10 years. Who is for this? Well, they are great. Well, otherwise they wouldn't be here. Yes, we are in the stage of richness. So we said 3 to 5 years. What would you say the year? 2019, 18 or 17? What would you say? 17. Is the age the same? Yes, I said that. Oh, okay. Sorry. So reach dinner time. So we had the two Rive Dogliano, Conegliano Valdobbiadene, Prosecco Superiore, Rive Dogliano. It takes 45 minutes to say the full name. Federico, 2018. 2018. Thank you for offering us these bottles, Federico. Do you want to add anything? I'm happy that you liked to taste old vintages of Prosecco Superiore, and in particular, this is pretty unusual in our world of spumante makers, because generally we don't keep the old years with the old bottles. And I would like to tell you a very quick anecdote in closing. Thing is that I'm not an enologist, I'm just the son of an enologist. And my father has always... So he has always said that he makes wine before spumante. So first he makes wine, vino, and then he makes spumante, sparkling wine. And since we also produce still wines, I saw that my father would save and spare the years of still wines, his favorite still wines, but never Prosecco. He wouldn't just keep Prosecco wines. And I've always wondered why. Why not? Why not keeping the two selections from this single vineyard wine? So I proposed that to him. And he actually, at the beginning, disagreed, because he went to the wine school, to the enological school, where he was taught that Prosecco, they wouldn't even say that it lasts 1 year. They would teach you that you have to drink Prosecco within 1 year. And there were many million bottles less. I'm talking about the OCG, because so now we have DOCG. In the past it was DOC. They made 30, 40, 50 million, no more. So that's the logic that they have imprinted in the mind, at least the enologists from that generation. That's what they were taught. And so you had to finish it all. And so, always just to do something different, I saved it for myself, almost hiding what I was doing. So I just kept them because I wanted to understand. Since I'm not an enologist, I wanted to understand the evolution of these wines because I saw how my mother would make them. He would put the same passion and same will to make the best wines, just like his favorite still wines. And so, little by little, he also, after 10 years, he told me that actually I am right. And I have always convinced him after 10 years that that's a good idea. And I'm happy because I keep tasting them year after year to see their evolution. And also, when you came to see us at the winery, we tasted 10 years ago, wines from 10 years ago. And personally, maybe it's because my family makes them, I like them because I like complex wines. And I think that every year complexity increases. Thank you, Federico. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Filippo. And thank you to you for participating. And now we meet with Roberta Surini outside. Thank you all.